right. Jeff, if you're into politics and sports, like we are, we're kind of junkies, then this book is for you. The new book is Power Players, Sports, Politics, and the American Presidency. Let's welcome to the show author, former White House correspondent, political reporter, and editor, Chris Cillizza. Chris, congratulations on the launch of the book.
Oh man, it feels like a long time coming. I had the thank you for the congratulations. I had the idea like 3 years ago. So the fact that it's finally out in the world is like actually somewhat surreal, but thank you.
Chris, most people who do know you know that you have a foot in both places, in politics, in sports, in your personal life, and in your professional life.
Mhm.
What made you decide that this was the kind of book that you wanted to write?
Well, in part that I've always sort of been. I've always had two things I'm really interested in: politics and sports. And so I had been looking for a long time at how could I combine those two in a smart way. Like obviously you could just smash the two together and try to write something. But and I got to looking at presidents and sort of the sports that they played, the sports they loved, the sports they watched as they got older, and trying to figure out what could that say about who they are, both who they were as people and then sort of how they governed. I was somewhat skeptical going into the research. I think you always go in and say like, here's an idea I have, but I don't know if it's going to be borne out. The good thing, and the reason that there is a book is is that it was borne out, that a lot of these guys, the lessons they learned from playing sports and in some cases from watching sports, uh, really do carry over and are sort of a telling window into how they approach the world.
Your book covers everybody from Eisenhower to Biden. Everybody except for LBJ really had sports had played sort of an essential
Mhm.
role when they ran for office or how they viewed the world. Having worked in politics, very interested in public image. Talk to us about presidents use sports to help make them more relatable and
Yeah.
shape their public persona for people.
Totally. So I think that the best way to think about sports vis-a-vis politics is sports is a common language that lots and lots and lots of people speak. If your job in politics is to reach people where they are, to convince people that you care about them, that you know them in some meaningful way, sports gives, in sports fandom, gives a really powerful vehicle to do that. What's interesting about it is some of the presidents who were the sportiest by nature didn't do a good job of using sports to reach out. And some of the presidents who were the least sporty by nature did do a good job. So I'll give you back to back examples. So Ronald Reagan, he was a lifeguard growing up. He played football, I mean, very briefly at Eureka College in California, like not big time college football at all. Not terribly athletic and not terribly interested in sports. Not a guy who's going to like watch a baseball game or even a football game on the weekends. But Reagan understood that being associated with winners in athletics and everywhere else was really important and a good thing for him. So he formalizes the process of bringing winning championship teams to the White House. So before that, yeah, I think a lot of people assume that's been going on forever. It really hasn't. It's been going on since sort of the early 80s. Prior to Reagan being in office, um, uh, the Celtics came to the White House in 1963. They came on a tour. Kennedy, JFK realized they were there and kind of like made it a little special, but they weren't there to like be honored. They were there on a tour. In 1916, the Washington Senators came to the White House. Calvin Coolidge invited them, which is weird because he's not even like a baseball fan. But regardless, but it hadn't been formalized in any meaningful way until Reagan got there, which is weird because Reagan is not a sports fan, but Reagan loved the pomp and the sort of pageantry of having the team there. They give him the kind of Reagan #1 jersey, with the one on the back or the at 38, whatever president he was on the back. And he loved all that stuff, and he understood at some sort of fundamental level that even for people who didn't really love Ronald Reagan, him being pictured with the Lakers, with Magic and Kareem, Kurt Rambis, that like that was a good thing for his overall persona. Now, the contrast of that is his vice president. So George Herbert Walker Bush is probably the sportiest president ever elected. The guy is good at lots of things. He played baseball. He was a first baseman at Yale, light hitting, good fielding, captain of the team. horseshoes, jumping out of a plane, parachutes. Like he did anything you could do, tennis, anything you could do that was sporty, he did. The problem, and it's not really a problem in life, but it was a problem for him in politics, is like from a very young age, his mother teaches him sportsmanship, that it's about the we versus the me, that you have to talk about the team versus you. So he'll come running in from a baseball game when he's a kid and say, "Oh, mom, I got 2 hits and I had 3 RBIs." And she would always give him the like, "Well, how did the team do, George?" So he was very focused on that. And I actually think it worked to his detriment in the White House because he was not good at touting his own accomplishments. He was always kind of talking about how the group had done something, how his cabinet had helped. And as a result, I think people didn't realize what he had actually done. I think it's one of the reasons that Bush is one of the, after he left office, the impression of him has improved significantly. Because I think people were like, oh, he actually did do a bunch of things. He was just really bad at talking about it. And I think at least some of that had to do with the way he was raised and in sports.
You mentioned Reagan bringing teams to the White House. Is that something that that Reagan figured out, or is that something political consultants figured out? And can you tell us a story you had in your book about the Giants and popcorn?
Yes. So I don't, to answer your first question candidly, I don't know whether it was consultants or Reagan. I would lean toward Reagan only because I think Reagan understood from his time with in acting and his time, working. He was a Cubs radio announcer, but before he went to Hollywood, like I think he understood perception and creating a scene for people and who you associate yourself with and why it matters. But I don't know the answer to that. Yes. So when the Giants win the Super Bowl, this was famously Harry Carson. They pour the Gatorade on Bill Parcells. It's a big deal. So when Reagan comes, when the Giants come to the White House to visit Reagan, they dump popcorn on Reagan because popcorn is his favorite thing. And again, like Reagan got that you got to go along with that and have fun with it. I'm not sure if I'm trying to think who it would be, but let's say Joey Bosa dumped popcorn on Donald Trump. Like I don't know how well that would go, but like Reagan understood intuitively, and that's why I would guess at least part of wanting winners to come to the White House was him. He understood intuitively that this having fun with these folks, being seen as kind of like their equals, they kind of respect him, he respects them, all accrued to the good for Ronald Reagan. And at the end of the day, Ronald Reagan was very focused on what's good for, on just like lots of politicians, what's good for Ronald Reagan and what makes him look good to the American public. And that was one of them. So having fun with Harry Carson was part of the deal.
You look at different consequential moments for our country throughout the book through the lens of sports, whether it's George Bush throwing out the first pitch at Yankee Stadium, Jimmy Carter boycotting the 1980 Olympics, the U.S. hockey team beating the Soviets. Talk to us about the intersection of sports and international politics that we see weave through the book.
Yeah. So I think the one, first of all, I think sort of the seminal moment, the beating heart of the book, the thing that most people identify with is Bush throwing the first pitch at Game 3 of the World Series in New York. I think for a lot of people that was an example that sports isn't just sports and politics isn't just politics, right? That it can be both. But I think the one I don't talk about as much and intrigues me is the decision to skip the 80 Olympics. I think for Carter, it was an underestimation or a misunderstanding of the power that the U.S. competing on the international stage, particularly against Russia, competing on the international stage could have. Carter didn't have a super sporty background. His father played tennis when he was growing up. He ran. He played a little bit of basketball, but he was not Dwight Eisenhower. He was not, nor was he Gerald Ford, right? I mean, he was not a great athlete. I think he misunderstood the power that sports had there. There were a number of people who tried, including athletes, who tried to emphasize to him how important the Olympics would be, and honestly, how important going there and kicking ass would be for for the United States, that it would send a message. I think Carter got so far down the road of making the choice and then not willing to be convinced otherwise. That plus his sort of unfamiliarity with how powerful sports can be in international diplomacy. By the way, Reagan, who follows him in office, totally understands that. Reagan opens the 1984 Olympics. Reagan is intimately involved as much as a president can be in the Olympics because he grasps that, like, this is a national point of pride. This is a thing that is not just sports and not just politics, but is both of them at the same time. But I think in some ways it's telling that Carter didn't grasp that, because I feel like his presidency, you look back and it's a series of missed opportunities. And that clearly was one. He thought he was doing the right thing with the boycott. He thought he would get more support from the international community. He did not get enough support from the international community. And lots and lots and lots of American athletes are still bitter about the fact that they didn't get to compete in 1980. So I think it hurt him much more than it helped him.
And looking at the different presidents and the different sports that they focused on, baseball seems to be the sport that is the least of an issue when you look left or right. Is there one sport or that seems to be more polarizing than others? And is baseball the sport that's the least polarizing?
Well, so the most common sport that they all played was golf. Now, we can debate whether golf is polarizing or not, but that was the sport that they played the most of. I think for me, it's less about polarizing and not versus like generational. So if you go back, Reagan, Nixon, Eisenhower, JFK, Ford played football in one way, shape, or form. And again, what's fascinating to me is, like, Nixon was widely described by his teammates as a tackling dummy, effectively. He was just there to get knocked over. I mean, Nixon's great gift there's a quote in the book, Nixon's great gift in football and in life was he got knocked down a lot and he got up a lot. But they all play, and even Reagan, who was an indifferent athlete at best, kind of a big guy, but an indifferent athlete, played football. Obviously, Ford played football at an extremely high level. JFK, who had terrible back problems and terrible health problems in general, played football at Harvard because that's what men did. Now, part of that is, I think, for the same reason that it used to be that you would have served in the military if you were going to be in Congress. So it used to be that people saw football as training ground for war. Eisenhower came out and said that. FDR came out and said that like young men in America should play football because it's a way that you can be tough and you can be prepared for war, with the expectation that we were going to be in these wars pretty much endlessly, and that would be required. Once you get to past Reagan, the elder Bush played baseball. The Clinton didn't really do much of anything. He ran. He played a little bit of basketball, but was like a very indifferent athlete. George W. Bush really played baseball, but came into his own with endurance sports sort of during the White House, like long rides on his mountain bike, long runs, that sort of thing. Obama played basketball. And I think that one is at least intriguing from a cultural perspective, because I think Obama in the White House and playing basketball dovetails with the NBA. I mean, this still amazes me. So when I used to watch the NBA, which I did all the time, you would never see the guys arriving for the games. But now everyone shows like what Russell Westbrook is wearing when he walks in, what LeBron James is wearing, like the dovetailing of an NBA and pop culture and coolness. Obama sort of typified that. But I do think it's much more, Trump played a little bit of baseball. Squash, actually, random fun fact, he played squash his freshman year at Fordham, which not many people know. And Biden, back to the old school, though he's older than a lot of these other ones, played football. So to me, it's more about generational than it is about like what sports were polarizing or not polarizing, or are polarizing or not polarizing. The generational thing is real, though, in terms of when you look at who played what when.
You mentioned basketball and Barack Obama. You had in the book, Basketball helped define who Barack Obama was as a black man in America. You also had some information about a pickup game on the president's 49th birthday. Now, I know some of the language shared at that game by one Kobe Bryant cannot be passed on here. Talk to us about Chris Paul, Kobe Bryant, Joakim Noah, and the president.
So I love this. I talked to a bunch of people who either were in the game or were watching the game. So yes, for Obama's 49th birthday, he invites a bunch of NBA guys, including LeBron, Chris Paul. Kobe is there but does not play. Joe Noah from the Bulls, Shane Battier, and there's a point in the game where Obama, who I talked to a bunch of people about this, trying to figure out, as a pickup basketball player myself, one of the things I was most interested in is like, how good is Obama actually at basketball? You know, it's so hard to tell when you're a president because people defer to you. Well,
who guards the president?
People were deferring to him in this game, and halfway through, and I will not use the language Kobe used, but I'll use the sentiment Kobe used. Kobe calls Chris Paul over and says, you know, you're one of the meanest people in basketball, and you're just letting this guy score on you over and over again. You need to play some defense. And so from that point on, Obama is shut down. I mean, the truth of the matter is, like, Obama is a perfectly fine pickup basketball player. Obama can't play with NBA guys, and that's no knock on him. Like, I'm a perfectly fine pickup basketball player. In a game with LeBron and Chris Paul and the guys I just mentioned, you have no chance. But yeah, I love that story. And I think it speaks to, you know, it was hard. I talked to Reggie Love, his body man who played at Duke. I talked to David Axelrod, who is his consultant, who was there watching. It's hard to get a sense of Obama, the basketball player. Reggie Love gave me like a little bit of a scouting report that I put in the book, which is, you know, pretty good left-handed drive. You can let him shoot, struggles to go to his right, which of course is like, you know, draw your own political conclusions on struggles to go to his right. But
you know, this week is Jackie Robinson Day in Major League Baseball. Jackie Robinson seems to have had a role in several presidents, from his friend, as you describe it, his friendship or a friendship with Richard Nixon, to his the impact that he left on Jimmy Carter's family. Can you tell us a little bit about the impact of Jackie Robinson as it comes to not only sports but politics?
Yeah, so I mean, because of the nature of the groundbreaking nature of his role as the first African American player in Major League Baseball, he has a presence that is more than just sports. And Jackie Robinson, is interested in politics too. One of the things that I think is most fascinating, I was thinking of this because of Jackie Robinson Day, and you mentioned it, but I just want to expand on it, is he and Nixon were close. Jackie Robinson was an admirer of Nixon. First of all, Jackie Robinson was a Republican, which even at the time, a Black Republican it was more common then than it is now, but it was not super common. And many of his friends were skeptical of sort of why he was. But Jackie Robinson reached out to Nixon when Nixon was Eisenhower's VP, said he thought that Nixon had good thoughts on on civil rights and what should be done. In the 1960 campaign, Robinson endorses Nixon. And the reason he does that, at least in part, is because he sees Kennedy sort of playing footsie with Southern governors over race and is resentful of that. Now, as things go on, in 1964, Republicans nominate obviously Nixon loses in 60. In 1964, Republicans nominate Barry Goldwater, who, to Robinson's mind, and I think he's right, largely writes off the black vote. Robinson urges Nixon, writes to Nixon, talks to Nixon about getting involved and saying, you know, the Republican Party wants black voters. Nixon rebuffs him. He basically doesn't respond. In 1968, again, Nixon is running the Southern strategy. Robinson decries that as racist. But even after that, I'm trying to remember, Robinson dies in 71. As he's dying, he writes Nixon a letter. Nixon is obviously in the White House at this point, saying, please reconsider, you know, we've been friends at points in the past. Please reconsider some of your stances on race, because I think you could have a real impact. And Nixon ignores the letter and Robinson dies later. But yeah, I mean, I think Jackie Robinson is a really good example of someone who transcended sports and politics in one, certainly transcended sports. And I think we've seen as I famously grew up when Michael Jordan was sort of the be all end all in basketball. And Michael Jordan's famous quote, which he says he didn't say, but is when they said, "Why don't you take a position on political issues?" He said, "Republicans buy sneakers too," right? And contrast that with a LeBron James wearing an "I Can't Breathe" warm up shirt, and LeBron James' sort of public advocacy on issues of officer-involved shootings and other issues. I mean, I just think the blurring of the lines between sports and politics are almost complete now. Jackie Robinson was very much on the cutting edge of that because of who he was in the culture, not just in sports.
That leads well to the last one for me, grouping voters by sports. In the book, we see NASCAR dads, soccer moms, and you close with the Biden chapter on pickleball voters. Tell me about identifying voters based on sports and characteristics.
So one, just to go back to Nixon just for a minute, so Nixon is actually a fan. I mean, he uses sports for political reasons too, but he's actually a fan. He goes to the 1969 game of the century college football game between Texas and Arkansas. He does that at least in part. There's a memo written by one of his aides. He does that at least in part because he believes that those are Nixon voters, silent majority voters, college football fans. Now, whether he's right or not, I don't know the answer to it, but I do think that that's how he saw it. I do think that we're getting more compartmentalized in how we think about voters. Bush, as you mentioned, NASCAR dads, Bush ran very strongly on that notion that people who go to NASCAR, have many of whom were in the South, were longtime Democrats by default, but were potential Bush voters. Soccer moms, same thing. Moms who take their kids to soccer, that they're socially liberal, fiscally conservative. Now, some of these labels, like any label, it's overly broad. It doesn't fit everyone. I'm sure there are soccer moms who are socially conservative and economically liberal, and the vice versa is true, and some who aren't involved in politics at all. But I did want to get into the pickleball thing, just because I think it is sweeping the country sports-wise. And I wrote about why Biden should play. Whether or not he will or not is another debate, but because it's right in the wheelhouse of the voter he needs. These are affluent, older voters, by and large, who have aggregated and played this game. And him just going out there, put a pickleball court at the White House, and just have him go out and play a few, knock it around a few times, I think would be great for him.
Oh, wait. So if you play pickleball, that means you're affluent and older?
You're certainly older. It tends to be older.
Man,
it's not always affluent, but like I talked to a couple of political people who said, and I said, like, if you had to say what a pickleball voter would look like, they said affluent and older.
I think Jeff just checked off another box on the voter file.
I know, Jason. I'm just waiting for how Jason's going to turn this into me.
I'm going to have fun. Don't worry. I'll let you finish, and then we'll let him go first. Jeff, get the last one.
All right.
I'll make sure to have fun with you.
Well, Chris, you've spent 3 years putting this book together. Apparently, this isn't the end. This book is going to spawn a documentary. How exciting is that for you, that this may be a possibility for you?
Yeah, I'm really excited. First of all, possibly spawn a documentary. I feel like I don't ever want to say too much, because it's like I don't have control over it. But I think it behooves itself to one. When we initially pitched the book, after I wrote a proposal, we pitched it to, among other people, the people who did The Last Dance, because I said, I just think that this episodically could fit. We talked to them for a long time, wound up not working out, which is fine. But I do think there's potential there for a documentary, just because I think we know that people are interested in documentaries about presidents and sports. So this is a documentary about sports and presidents. So I'm hoping that that's the pitch. But yeah, I think that would be really cool. I mean, look, to be honest, to see something that you work on just as like a Word file on your computer for so long actually become a physical copy of a book is a really neat experience. Like my kids, I've been writing, for years. It's my job. My kids are like much more impressed that I've written a book than anything else that I've written, because they actually can hold it and see it and be like, it has my name on it. And, it's dedicated to them, and they can see all that stuff. So it moves the needle in coolness with my kids much more than anything else I do.
You're
It
like,
moved.
I do this all day, every day, right?
Exactly.
Like,
That's what I said. All I do is write. They don't put it in a hardback and publish it.
Well, Chris, it is a great book, and everybody should go
thank
out
you.
and get it. Where other than the book, where else can we find you these days?
So I am currently writing on Substack. So just Substack, Chris Cillizza, my name, Chris, and the last name is CILLIZZA.substack.com, or just type Chris Cillizza Substack. I'm writing daily. It's mostly free. It's just because I like writing and I enjoy it. You also can go to youtube.com/Chris Cillizza, again, my name. I'm making videos there. I'm on the Tony Kornheiser show once every couple of weeks, and hopefully be popping up a little bit more. Honestly, I've been laying a little bit low, but since the book has come out, I think I have to emerge a little more. But right now, that's where you can see me.
well, the new book is Power Players, Sports, Politics, and the American Presidency. Chris Cillizza, thank you for popping back up and giving us some time to talk about it all.
Thank you guys, and thanks for your kind words about the book.